In the vast and ancient amphitheater of the celestial Concord, the air was thick with anticipation. The chamber, carved from shimmering crystal and glowing faintly with the light of distant stars, was a testament to the unity of 300 species. Each seat in the rising tiers was occupied by beings of wildly different forms, some humanoid, others amorphous, some floating in translucent spheres of liquid. The hum of countless whispered voices reverberated through the chamber like a low, restless tide. At the heart of the amphitheater stood Elder Corin, his 4 luminous eyes glowing faintly against his weathered, pale gray skin. His tall, slender frame was wrapped in ceremonial robes that seemed to shift colors with the faintest movement, reflecting the weight of his decades of service to the Concord. Despite the strength in his voice, his age was evident in the slight tremor of his hands as he gripped the edge of the speaker's platform. When he raised one hand for silence, the murmurs ceased, leaving a stillness that felt almost unnatural. "I bring before you a warning," Corin began, his voice deep and resonant, carrying effortlessly across the chamber. "A new species has risen among the stars. They call themselves Terrans, and though they are young, their potential is unparalleled." He paused, letting the words settle like a distant rumble of thunder before a storm. "They have only just begun to explore beyond their own system, but their progress is unlike anything we have seen before. In mere centuries, they have leapt from fire and stone to splitting the atom, from primitive machines to reaching their moon. And now, they reach for the stars." The assembly stirred. Some representatives exchanged uneasy glances, their bioluminescent skin or shifting exoskeletons betraying their discomfort. Others scoffed openly, their laughter echoing faintly in the vast chamber. Corin's 4 eyes swept across the room, his gaze steady, unyielding. "They remind me," Corin continued, his tone heavier now, "of the Drolith Empire. You all remember what they were capable of. How quickly they rose. How devastating their fall was, not just for themselves, but for us all. The Terrans share their adaptability, their ingenuity, their hunger for progress. And like the Drolith, they are unpredictable." From her elevated seat at the center of the chamber, High Chancellor Ceres leaned forward, her silver-hued skin catching the soft light of the amphitheater's crystalline walls. Her sharp, angular features were framed by a flowing mantle of deep indigo, signifying her authority. When she spoke, her voice was smooth but edged with steel, cutting through the tension like a blade. "Elder Corin," she began, her tone laced with condescension, "you speak of these Terrans as if they are a storm poised to sweep across the galaxy. But let us not forget they are barely out of their cradle. A fragmented species, squabbling among themselves, clinging to their fragile planet. They are no Drolith. They are children, playing with tools they do not fully understand." A ripple of approval spread through the assembly, punctuated by nods and murmurs of agreement. Ceres's confidence was infectious, her words a balm to those who found Corin's warning too unsettling to consider. She tilted her head slightly, her silver eyes narrowing as she delivered a final blow. "Why should we concern ourselves with a species so primitive, so divided, when we have far greater matters to attend to?" Corin's gaze locked with hers, his expression unyielding. "Because, High Chancellor," he replied, his voice steady despite the growing opposition, "it is precisely their division that makes them dangerous. Terrans are not bound by tradition or conformity. They adapt. They innovate. They thrive in chaos. When faced with obstacles, they do not retreat, they find ways to break through. Their history is one of survival against impossible odds. If we do not engage with them now, while they are still finding their footing among the stars, we may one day face a force we cannot control." The chamber erupted into a cacophony of voices. Some representatives rose from their seats, their forms shifting with agitation or indignation. Others leaned toward their neighbors, whispering hurriedly. Above it all, Ceres sat unmoving, her expression cold and unreadable. Finally, she raised a hand, and the noise subsided. "Elder Corin," she said, her tone dismissive, "your concerns are noted. But the Concord will not be swayed by fear of a fledgling species. Let the Terrans explore their small corner of the galaxy. If they ever become more than a curiosity, we will deal with them then." The assembly voted swiftly, the decision nearly unanimous. The Terrans would be ignored, their existence deemed insignificant. Corin remained on the platform as the representatives began to disperse, their attention already shifting to other matters. His shoulders sagged slightly, the weight of his warning unheeded pressing down on him. As he turned to leave, his assistant Rilas, a younger member of his species with golden markings along her face, approached him quietly. "They didn't listen," she said, her voice low, tinged with frustration. "They never do," Corin replied, his voice heavy with resignation. He paused, glancing back at the now empty chamber, where the echoes of the debate still lingered like distant thunder. "But storms don't wait for permission. They come when they will. And this one is already on the horizon." The Vanguard drifted silently through the endless void, its hull gleaming faintly under the cold light of distant stars. Inside the ship, a quiet tension hung in the air, the kind that comes from weeks of navigating the empty expanse of uncharted space. The crew, an eclectic mix of scientists, engineers, and explorers, moved with a sense of purpose, but their movements were subdued, weighed down by the vastness pressing in on them from all sides. Captain Elias Drake, standing at the helm, stared out through the observation window, his sharp features illuminated by the faint glow of the ship's instruments. His eyes, a piercing blue, scanned the darkness as if searching for something that might finally break the monotony. And then, it appeared. "Captain," came the voice of Lieutenant Mara Voss, the ship's navigator, her tone tinged with awe. "We've found something." Drake turned sharply, his gaze following her outstretched hand toward the main display. There, suspended in the infinite blackness, was a structure unlike anything they had ever seen. It floated in perfect stillness, its surface shimmering faintly as if coated in liquid starlight. The Sentinel Beacon, as it would later be called, was massive, its spire-like form stretching hundreds of meters into the void. Its design was alien, almost organic, with intricate patterns etched across its surface that seemed to shift and writhe when viewed too closely. Thin, vein-like filaments glowed faintly along its edges, pulsing with an otherworldly rhythm, as though the structure itself was alive. The crew gathered in the observation deck, their faces a mixture of wonder and unease. "What is it?" someone whispered, their voice barely audible over the hum of the ship's systems. No one answered. Even the most seasoned explorers among them were at a loss. The beacon seemed ancient, yet impossibly advanced, its very presence radiating a quiet power that made the hairs on the back of their necks stand on end. Drake's voice broke the silence. "Bring us closer," he ordered, his tone calm but firm. His words carried the weight of a man who had spent his life chasing the unknown, a man who understood the risks but was willing to face them head-on. The crew hesitated for a moment, their unease palpable, but they obeyed. Slowly, the Vanguard approached the beacon, its lights casting long, flickering shadows across the alien structure. When they were close enough to see the intricate details of the beacon's surface, Drake called a meeting in the ship's central chamber. The room was filled with heated voices as the crew debated their next move. "This thing could be a relic of some long-dead civilization," argued Dr. Arlen Hayes, the ship's lead scientist, his voice trembling with excitement. "If we study it, we might uncover secrets that could change everything we know about the universe." "Or it could be a trap," countered Chief Engineer Lyra Kane, her dark eyes narrowing. "We have no idea what this thing is or what it's capable of." For all we know, it could be a weapon or worse. Drake listened in silence, his expression unreadable. Finally, he raised a hand, and the room fell quiet. "We came out here to find answers," he said, his voice steady but carrying an edge of determination. "This could be the key to understanding our place in the galaxy. If we turn away now, we might never get another chance." His words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their implications. After a long pause, the crew nodded in reluctant agreement. The decision was made. The Vanguard extended a docking arm toward the beacon, its mechanical claw latching onto the alien structure with a soft hiss. A team of engineers and scientists suited up and boarded the beacon, their boots clanging softly against its metallic surface. The air inside the structure was cold and still, and the faint glow of the filaments along the walls cast eerie shadows that danced with every movement. At the heart of the beacon, they found what appeared to be a control panel, a circular platform etched with symbols that seemed to shift and rearrange themselves as they watched. Dr. Hayes approached it cautiously, his gloved hands trembling as he reached out to touch the surface. The moment his fingers made contact, the beacon came alive. A low hum resonated through the structure, growing in intensity until it became a deep, bone-shaking vibration. The glowing filaments flared brightly, bathing the chamber in a blinding white light. Back on the Vanguard, alarms blared as the ship's sensors detected a massive energy surge emanating from the beacon. "What's happening?" shouted Lyra Kane, her voice barely audible over the noise. Drake's jaw tightened as he stared at the display, watching in stunned silence as a wave of energy rippled outward from the beacon, spreading across the surrounding void like the shockwave of a supernova. Unbeknownst to the crew, the activation of the beacon sent a signal hurtling through the galaxy, its reach extending far beyond what any of them could have imagined. On distant worlds, ancient machines buried beneath layers of dust and rock began to stir, their dormant systems flickering to life for the first time in millennia. Among the stars, the signal was intercepted by the Celestial Concord, its energy signature setting off alarms in their most secure monitoring stations. And in the darkest corners of the galaxy, where no light could reach, something else awoke. The Eclipse Swarm, a hive mind species long thought to be extinct, stirred from its slumber. Deep within its vast, organic ships, millions of shadow-like creatures began to move, their collective consciousness reawakening with a single, unified thought: consume. The swarm had been dormant for eons, waiting for a spark to reignite its hunger. The beacon's signal was that spark. Back aboard the Vanguard, the crew worked frantically to shut down the beacon, but it was too late. The signal had already spread, its effects rippling across the galaxy in ways they could not yet comprehend. Drake stood at the observation window, his hands clenched into fists as he stared at the now dormant beacon. It floated silently once more, its glow fading as if it had spent all its energy in that single, fateful moment. "What have we done?" whispered Mara Voss, her voice barely audible. No one answered. The weight of their actions pressed down on them, a heavy silence filling the room as they realized they had set something in motion, something far beyond their understanding. And far beyond their control. The galaxy, vast and ancient, trembled with the awakening of the Sentinel beacon. Its signal, unseen but felt, rippled across the void, threading through the fabric of space like a whisper carried on a storm. On Orelus Prime, the capital world of the Celestial Concord, the skies above shimmered with the light of its 3 suns. The sprawling cityscape of crystalline towers and floating spires gleamed like a living jewel, its beauty masking the unease that now stirred within its heart. In the High Council chamber, Elder Corrin stood before the great window that overlooked the endless expanse of the city. His 4 luminous eyes glowed faintly, their light dimmed by the weight of what he felt. The beacon's activation was not just a soundless pulse in the dark, it was a disturbance, a shift in the currents of the galaxy, and Corrin could feel it in his very bones. He turned slowly, his ornate robes brushing against the polished floor, as Chancellor Ceres entered the chamber. "Chancellor," Corrin began, his voice low but firm, "the Terrans have done something unprecedented. They have not only activated the Sentinel beacon but have altered it. Enhanced it. Its signal now reaches further than it ever could before tenfold." Ceres, her silver-hued skin catching the light like molten metal, raised an eyebrow, her expression one of practiced indifference. "And you are certain it was the Terrans?" she asked, her tone sharp, dismissive. "A fledgling species, barely capable of interstellar travel, somehow managed to unravel the secrets of a relic that predates even our own histories." Corrin's gaze did not waver. "They are more capable than you give them credit for, Chancellor. Their ingenuity is unlike anything we have encountered. This is no coincidence. The signal they have unleashed will not go unnoticed. It will draw attention from allies, yes, but also from forces we dare not provoke." Ceres's lips curled into a faint smile, though there was no warmth in it. "You speak as though the galaxy is teetering on the edge of chaos, Corrin. Yet I see no evidence of this supposed storm you fear. The Concord remains strong, and the Terrans remain insignificant. Let them play with their toys. They will burn themselves out before they can pose any real threat." Corrin's shoulders sagged slightly, the weight of her dismissal pressing down on him. "You refuse to see the danger until it is too late," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "The signal is already spreading. And what it awakens, will not wait for us to act." Far from the gleaming towers of Aurelius Prime, on the desolate mining outpost of Orion's Edge, the signal arrived like a ghostly echo, faint but insistent. The outpost, perched on the jagged remains of an asteroid belt, was a stark contrast to the grandeur of the Concord's core worlds. Its structures were utilitarian, built for function rather than beauty, and the air carried the metallic tang of ore and machinery. Inside the central command station, Administrator Joran Veles leaned over a console, his sharp features illuminated by the flickering light of the holographic display. The signal pulsed on the screen, a pattern of energy unlike anything he had seen before. His assistant, Lyra, stood nearby, her wide, cautious eyes fixed on the data. "This is strange," Lyra said, her voice hesitant. "It's not a natural phenomenon. And it's not Concord technology, either." Veles's lips curved into a sly smile. "No, it's not," he said, his tone laced with intrigue. "Which makes it all the more interesting. Whatever this is, it's worth investigating." Lyra frowned, her unease evident. "Shouldn't we inform the Concord first? This could be dangerous." Veles waved a hand dismissively. "And let the bureaucrats bury it under layers of protocol? No. We'll handle this ourselves. If we're the first to uncover its secrets, the rewards will be ours alone." Despite her misgivings, Lyra followed Veles as he prepared their ship for departure. The small vessel, designed for short-range exploration, hummed to life as they set course for the signal's origin. Neither of them knew what awaited them, but the promise of discovery and the potential for power was too enticing to ignore. Meanwhile, the Vanguard had made its way to Orion's Edge, its arrival marked by a ripple of unease among the outpost's inhabitants. The Terran's ship, sleek and unfamiliar, docked cautiously, its crews stepping out into the harsh artificial light of the station. Captain Elias Drake led the way, his posture tense but composed, his piercing blue eyes scanning the faces of the Concord workers who had gathered to watch. The first meeting between humanity and alien life was not marked by fanfare or celebration. It was quiet, almost somber, the weight of the moment pressing down on both sides. Joran Veles, flanked by Lyra and a handful of guards, stepped forward to greet the Terrans. His expression was one of curiosity tinged with suspicion, his sharp gaze appraising Drake and his crew. "You're a long way from home," Veles said, his voice smooth but edged with caution. Drake nodded, his jaw tight. "We didn't come here looking for trouble. We came looking for answers." Veles's smile was faint, calculating. "Answers, you say? Perhaps we can help each other, then. But not here. Not under the watchful eye of the Concord." Drake hesitated, his instincts warning him to tread carefully. But the opportunity was too valuable to pass up. "What do you propose?" Veles gestured for the Terrans to follow him. "A simple exchange. Knowledge for knowledge. You share what you've learned, and I'll share what I know. No bureaucracy. No interference. Just understanding." The tension in the air was palpable as the two groups moved away from the prying eyes of the outpost's workers. Lyra lingered at the back of the group, her unease growing with each step. She couldn't shake the feeling that this meeting, this exchange, was the beginning of something far larger than any of them could comprehend. As the Vanguard's crew and Veles's team began their cautious dialogue, the signal from the beacon continued to spread, its reach extending ever further into the galaxy. On distant worlds, ancient forces stirred, their slumber interrupted by the call of the beacon. And in the vast emptiness between the stars, the Eclipse swarm moved, its hive mind awakening with a singular, insatiable hunger. The ripples had begun. And the galaxy would never be the same. The galaxy was alive with whispers. The Terrans, a species once considered insignificant, had begun to spread their influence like wildfire. On the outer territories of the Celestial Concord, where life was harsh and resources scarce, the arrival of Terran ships brought hope to struggling colonies. Their technology, crude yet brilliant in its simplicity, solved problems that had plagued these worlds for generations. Machines that repaired themselves, energy sources that thrived in hostile environments, and agricultural techniques that turned barren soil fertile, all gifts from the Terrans, shared freely and without the bureaucratic entanglements of the Concord. But it wasn't just their technology that captivated the outer worlds. The Terrans brought with them something far more potent, their culture. Songs that spoke of resilience and longing, stories of triumph against impossible odds, and art that seemed to capture the very essence of the human spirit. On alien worlds where life was defined by rigid traditions, the wild, unrestrained creativity of the Terrans was like a spark in the darkness. Markets bustled with traders bartering for Terran artifacts, and taverns echoed with the haunting melodies of human ballads, sung by alien voices. For the first time in centuries, the outer territories felt alive. But not everyone welcomed the change. In the towering halls of the Concord High Council, the atmosphere was heavy with tension. The chamber, a vast dome of shimmering crystal, seemed to amplify every word spoken within it, making even the smallest whisper feel like a declaration. At its center stood Chancellor Ceres, her silver-hued form gleaming under the soft light. Her expression was calm, but her eyes burned with quiet determination. "The Terrans are a threat," she began, her voice cutting through the murmurs of the gathered counselors. "Their influence spreads unchecked, undermining the stability of our outer territories. They bypass our laws, our systems, and our authority. If we do not act now, their chaos will infect the heart of the Concord." The council murmured in agreement, their faces a mix of concern and resolve. But one voice rose above the rest. "And if we act rashly," said Elder Corin, stepping forward, "we risk turning them into an enemy we cannot afford to have." All eyes turned to him. Corin's presence was commanding, his four luminous eyes scanning the room with a calm intensity. He spoke slowly, deliberately, his words carrying the weight of centuries of wisdom. "The Terrans are not invaders," he continued. "They are explorers, builders, dreamers. What you see as chaos, I see as potential. They have brought life to worlds we abandoned, hope to people we forgot. Is this not what the Concord was meant to stand for? Ceres' lips tightened. And what do you suggest, Elder? That we allow them to continue unchecked? That we let them rewrite the order we have spent millennia building? I suggest, Corin replied, his voice steady, that we bring them into the Concord. As allies, not adversaries. Their ingenuity, their spirit could strengthen us, not weaken us. But if we push them away, if we isolate them, we will only fuel their defiance. And defiance, Chancellor, is a fire that spreads. For a moment, the chamber was silent. The counselors exchanged uneasy glances, caught between Ceres' caution and Corin's vision. Finally, Ceres spoke. The Concord cannot risk instability, she said, her tone final. We will establish a quarantine zone around Terran space. A containment accord, to limit their expansion and influence. If they wish to trade or travel beyond their borders, they will do so under our terms. Corin's shoulders sagged slightly, but his expression remained calm. You are making a mistake, he said softly. But his words were drowned out by the council's vote. The decision was made. Within days, a fleet of Concord ships was dispatched to enforce the quarantine. Massive vessels, their sleek designs a testament to centuries of technological refinement, formed an impenetrable wall around Terran space. Their presence was a warning, a silent declaration that the Terrans would not be allowed to disrupt the Concord's carefully maintained order. But the Terrans were not so easily contained. On the edge of the quarantine zone, a Concord patrol ship intercepted a small Terran freighter. The freighter, a patchwork of mismatched parts and unorthodox modifications, seemed laughably primitive compared to the sleek Concord vessel. But as the patrol ship moved to block its path, the freighter's captain, a young woman with fire in her eyes, activated a device that sent the Concord ship's systems into chaos. Lights flickered, engines sputtered, and the sleek vessel was left adrift as the freighter slipped past, its engines roaring defiantly. Word of the incident spread quickly, and it wasn't long before similar encounters began to occur. Terran ships, with their unconventional designs and unpredictable tactics, proved to be a thorn in the Concord's side. They exploited weaknesses the Concord didn't even know it had, turning the very order and precision of their fleets against them. For every blockade the Concord established, the Terrans found a way around it. For every rule imposed, they found a loophole. Back on Aurelus Prime, Chancellor Ceres watched the reports with growing frustration. They are testing us, she said, her voice cold. We must respond with strength. But Corin, standing in the shadows of the council chamber, shook his head. Strength alone will not win this battle, he said quietly. The Terrans are not fighting with weapons or ships. They are fighting with ideas. And ideas cannot be contained. As the first sparks of conflict flickered across the galaxy, the Terrans continued to trade, to explore, to share their culture with those willing to listen. And while the Concord struggled to maintain its grip, the outer territories began to question their allegiance. For the first time, they saw an alternative to the rigid order of the Concord, a new way of thinking, a new way of living. The galaxy was changing. And the Concord's containment plan, meant to preserve their order, was only hastening its unraveling. The vast expanse of space stretched endlessly, a silent witness to the unfolding drama at the edge of the quarantine zone. Here, the stars seemed to shimmer with anticipation as two Terran ships, the Resolute and the Odyssey, approached the formidable Concord blockade. The Concord vessels, sleek and imposing, formed a wall of authority and control, their presence a clear message: no passage, no exceptions. Yet, the Terrans were undeterred. The Resolute and the Odyssey were not just ships, they were symbols of humanity's indomitable spirit and ingenuity. Their hulls, a patchwork of innovations and adaptations, spoke of a people who thrived on challenge and change. As they neared the blockade, the tension in the air was palpable, like the charged silence before a storm. Inside the Resolute, Captain Elias Drake stood at the helm, his gaze steady and determined. His crew moved with practiced ease, their confidence in him and their mission unshakable. "We face giants today," Drake said, his voice calm but resolute, "but remember, it's not strength that wins the day, but strategy." As the Concorde ships prepared to intercept, the Terrans launched their plan. From the Resolute and Odyssey, small devices known as data relays were deployed, scattering like seeds across the void. These relays, crafted with Terran ingenuity, began broadcasting streams of data, music, stories, and technological blueprints directly to nearby worlds. It was a bold move, bypassing the Concorde's iron grip on information and spreading Terran culture like a beacon of light in the darkness. The Concorde commanders watched in disbelief as their systems struggled to contain the unexpected influx of data. Their ships, designed for combat and control, were ill-prepared for this new kind of warfare, one fought with ideas rather than weapons. As the chaos unfolded, Captain Drake appeared on the screens of the Concorde fleet, his image clear and composed amidst the turmoil. His eyes, sharp and sincere, met those of the Concorde officers with a calm defiance. "We seek understanding, not conflict," Drake declared, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 hopes. "Let's talk instead of fight." His words hung in the air, a plea for dialogue amidst the rising tension. The Concorde officers, caught off guard by the Terrans' unexpected approach, hesitated. Here was a chance to end the standoff peacefully, to bridge the chasm of misunderstanding with conversation rather than conflict. After a tense silence, the Concorde fleet began to retreat, their ships pulling back from the blockade. The decision was not one of defeat, but of cautious reconsideration. The Terrans had shown not just their resourcefulness, but their willingness to engage in dialogue, and this act of defiance coupled with diplomacy left the Concorde with much to ponder. Back on Orlis Prime, the incident was the talk of the council chambers. Chancellor Ceres listened to the reports with a mixture of frustration and intrigue. The Terrans had embarrassed the Concorde, yes, but they had also revealed a potential that could not be ignored. "They are a threat," one counselor insisted, his voice echoing with urgency. "They undermine our authority at every turn." "Or perhaps an opportunity," Corrin countered, his tone thoughtful. "They have shown us their strength lies not in conquest, but in connection. We must decide whether to fear them or to learn from them." The council was divided, debates raging over the implications of the Terrans' actions. Some saw them as a destabilizing force, a challenge to the Concorde's order. Others, however, saw the potential for a new alliance, a chance to infuse the Concorde with fresh ideas and perspectives. As the council deliberated, the galaxy watched and waited. The first clash had been more than a confrontation, it was a turning point, a moment that would shape the future of both the Concorde and the Terrans. And in the quiet that followed, the stars continued to shine, bearing silent witness to the unfolding saga of understanding and change. In the cold silence of uncharted space, a forgotten beacon pulsed faintly, its rhythmic signal echoing across the void. The beacon, ancient and enigmatic, had long been silent, its purpose buried beneath the weight of time. But now, something had stirred it to life. Its pulse grew stronger, sending ripples of energy through the darkness, reaching into the depths of the unknown. And in those depths, something awoke. The Eclipse Swarm had been dormant for millennia, a hive-mind species so ancient that their name was spoken only in whispers, their existence relegated to myth. But the beacon's call was irresistible, a summons that roused them from their slumber. Slowly, Their vast organic ships, pulsating with eerie bioluminescence, began to emerge from the shadows. They moved like predators, silent and deliberate, their forms both beautiful and terrifying, living ecosystems of flesh and shadow, merging seamlessly with the void around them. The first colonies to encounter the swarm never saw them coming. Entire worlds fell silent overnight, their lights extinguished, their people consumed. Survivors, few and scattered, spoke of horrors that defied comprehension. They described massive, writhing ships that seemed alive, their surfaces shifting and pulsing like breathing organisms. From these ships emerged creatures of pure shadow, their forms indistinct but their presence suffocating. They moved with an unnatural grace, devouring everything in their path: structures, technology, even life itself. Nothing was spared. The swarm did not conquer, they consumed. Planets once teeming with life became husks, their surfaces scarred and lifeless. The stars themselves seemed dimmer in their wake, as if the swarm drained the very light from the galaxy. In the heart of the Concord High Council, panic gripped the chamber like a suffocating fog. Reports poured in from the outer colonies, each more dire than the last. Holographic maps displayed the spread of the swarm, a dark stain creeping ever closer to the Concord's core worlds. The counselors, usually composed and deliberate, were now frantic, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of fear and desperation. "Our fleets are useless against them," one counselor exclaimed, slamming a fist on the crystalline table. "Every engagement ends in disaster. We can't even damage their ships, let alone stop them." "They are not just ships," another countered, her voice trembling. "They are alive. They adapt, they learn. Every time we strike, they come back stronger." Chancellor Ceres stood at the center of the chaos, her silver-hued skin glinting under the chamber's light. Her expression was unreadable, but the tension in her posture betrayed the weight of the decisions she faced. "We cannot allow fear to paralyze us," she said, her voice cutting through the noise. "We must find a solution. Quickly." From the shadows of the chamber, Elder Corin stepped forward. His presence was calm, almost serene, but his luminous eyes burned with urgency. "We need help," he said simply. The council fell silent, all eyes turning to him. "What are you suggesting?" Ceres asked, her tone wary. "The Terrans," Corin replied, his voice steady. "Their creativity, their unpredictability, it's unlike anything we've ever seen. They've outmaneuvered us, outthought us, at every turn. If anyone can find a way to fight the swarm, it's them." A murmur spread through the council, a mix of skepticism and reluctant agreement. "The Terrans are unpredictable," one counselor argued. "We cannot trust them." "We cannot afford not to," Corin countered. "Our fleets are failing. Our colonies are falling. The swarm is unlike any threat we've faced before. If we do not adapt, we will be consumed." Ceres's expression hardened. She had spent her career maintaining the Concord's order, its stability. To ask for help from the Terrans, a species she had worked so hard to contain, felt like admitting failure. But the reports from the outer colonies left her no choice. The swarm was relentless, unstoppable. And the Concord was running out of time. "Very well," she said at last, her voice heavy with reluctance. "We will send a delegation to Earth. But make no mistake, this is a gamble, and if it fails, the consequences will be dire." As the Concord prepared to reach out to the Terrans, the galaxy held its breath. The swarm continued its advance, an unstoppable tide of shadow and hunger, leaving silence in its wake. For the first time in centuries, the Concord's dominance was not just challenged, it was on the brink of collapse. And amidst the darkness, a fragile hope flickered. The Terrans, with their boundless ingenuity and defiance of convention, represented the Concorde's last, desperate chance. But would they answer the call? And if they did, would it be enough to stop the eclipse swarm? The stars seemed to dim as the question lingered, unanswered, in a vast and silent void. The uneasy alliance between the Terrans and the Concorde was forged in desperation, a fragile thread binding two vastly different civilizations. Suspicion lingered in every glance, every word exchanged, but the looming threat of the eclipse swarm left no room for division. The galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath as this unlikely coalition prepared for war. At the heart of the Terran fleet, aboard the Resolute, Admiral Elias Drake stood before his officers. His presence commanded the room, his eyes sharp and unwavering. "We face an enemy unlike any other," he began, his voice steady yet charged with determination. "They are relentless, unified, and terrifyingly adaptive. But they are not invincible." He gestured to a hologram of the swarm's flagship, a massive, pulsating biomechanical monstrosity that seemed to breathe with malevolent purpose. "This is their heart," Drake continued. "Their hive mind. If we can disrupt it, we can sever their coordination and turn their strength into chaos." Drake's plan was as audacious as it was dangerous. The quantum disruptors, experimental devices derived from the ancient Sentinel beacon, were untested and volatile. But they offered the only chance to fracture the swarm's hive mind. Leading the strike team tasked with deploying these disruptors was Dr. Arias Solon, a brilliant Terran scientist whose mind was as sharp as her resolve. Aboard the stealth vessel Eclipse's Edge, Solon and her team prepared for their mission. The ship was a shadow in the void, its sleek design a testament to Terran ingenuity. Solon's hands trembled as she double-checked the disruptors, not from fear, but from the weight of responsibility. She glanced at her team engineers, soldiers, and explorers, all of them chosen for their skill and bravery. "We're not just fighting for Earth," she said quietly, her voice carrying through the small cabin. "We're fighting for every world the swarm has taken, and every world they will take if we fail." The battle began with a flash of light as the combined Terran and Concorde fleets engaged the swarm. The void erupted into chaos, a symphony of destruction as ships clashed amidst the stars. The swarm's organic vessels moved with terrifying precision, their shadow-like tendrils lashing out to consume their enemies. But the Terrans, true to their nature, fought with unpredictability. Their chaotic tactics and innovative weaponry caught the swarm off guard, forcing them to adapt in ways they had never encountered before. Concorde ships, disciplined and methodical, provided a stabilizing force, their formations holding the line while the Terrans created openings. Together, they pushed back against the tide, buying precious time for Eclipse's Edge to slip through the chaos and approach the swarm's flagship. As the stealth vessel neared the monstrous structure, its surface seemed alive, shifting and pulsating as if aware of their presence. Inside the ship, Solon's team readied themselves, their breaths shallow as they prepared to step into the unknown. "This is it," Solon whispered, her voice barely audible. "The heart of the swarm." The interior of the swarm's flagship was a nightmare made flesh. The walls pulsed with a sickly glow, veins of bioluminescent energy coursing through the structure like blood. The air was thick and humid, carrying a low, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate in their bones. Solon and her team moved cautiously, their footsteps muffled by the organic floor beneath them. At the center of the ship lay the hive mind's core, a massive, pulsating sphere of light and shadow. It radiated an oppressive presence, a consciousness that seemed to watch their every move. Solon's heart pounded as she approached, the quantum disruptors cradled in her arms. "We're here," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. "Let's end this." As her team worked to deploy the disruptors, the swarm reacted. Shadow-like creatures emerged from the walls, their forms shifting and writhing as they lunged at the intruders. The team fought desperately, their weapons flashing in the dim light. Solon focused on her task, her fingers flying over the controls as chaos erupted around her. "Almost there," she shouted, her voice barely audible over the cacophony. With a final command, the disruptors activated, releasing a wave of energy that rippled through the ship. The hive mind's core convulsed, its light flickering as the disruptors tore through its connection to the swarm. Outside, the effect was immediate. The swarm's fleet faltered, their once perfect coordination shattered. Ships collided with one another, their movements erratic and disjointed. The combined Terran and Concord forces seized the opportunity, pressing the attack with renewed vigor. Admiral Drake led the charge, his voice echoing across the COMM channels. "This is our moment. All ships, focus fire on the swarm's remaining forces. Let's finish this." The battle raged on, the void alight with the fury of destruction. Terran and Concord ships fought side by side, their differences forgotten in the face of a common enemy. Losses were heavy, but they pressed on, their determination unyielding. Finally, with a deafening explosion, the swarm's flagship was destroyed. The remaining swarm vessels, now leaderless and disoriented, were eradicated one by one. The battle was over. The aftermath was a mixture of relief and sorrow. The cost of victory was staggering, the debris of countless ships floating silently in the void. On the Resolute, Drake stood on the bridge, his gaze fixed on the wreckage. He felt the weight of every life lost, but also the pride of what they had achieved. "We did it," he murmured, his voice heavy with emotion. "We stopped them." Back on Concord Prime, the Council convened to discuss the Alliance's success. Elder Corrin spoke first, his voice calm but firm. "Humanity has proven their worth," he said. "Their unpredictability, their creativity, it was not a weakness, but their greatest strength. Without them, we would have been lost." Chancellor Ceres nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Then it is decided. Earth will be invited to join the Concord as a full member." For the first time in history, humanity stood as equals among the stars. The swarm had been defeated, but the alliance forged in the heat of battle promised a new era of cooperation and understanding. And as Elder Corrin reflected on the events, he realized that what had once been seen as humanity's greatest threat, their defiance of order, their chaotic nature, had become their greatest gift.